Hello, good afternoon. I'll have the next 20 minutes to explain you how you can save the world. And I'm supposed to not move beyond this because then my head is chopped off. There you go, that's me. Who am I? I'm a recovering business analyst because I used to work as a business analyst. I've started 2 businesses in digital consultancy, both of which by now I've sold, and I've started a new business. Not before learning again, because I went back to school at Cambridge University to learn about sustainability and to discover how I could make a change in this field. But so I have a very thorough background of years and years and years, I've stopped counting, in digital and IT. So how did I switch? How did I do the switch from digital innovation to sustainable innovation? There are a lot of parallels and there are a lot of methods that work in one, which I can translate into the other. The market is as disruptive as it was in the beginning of digital innovation due to other reasons, but things are shifting and happening. To be able to help a company turn into a sustainable company inevitably goes with cutting through its silos. You cannot touch only one part of the business, you touch every part of the business. And nobody knows how we need to turn this world into a sustainable system. So it's an excellent field for innovation because we will have to invent it as we go. But let's take a step back and look where we are today. This is how I see our reality we live in today. I don't know if the name Alexander Selkirk rings a bell, but he's the real person on which the story about what's his name again? Sorry. Robinson Crusoe was based, yes, the book and the movie. Alexander Selkirk lived for real. He was stuck on a deserted island for real for 4.5 years. So what was the reality when he himself decided to leave the ship? He was convinced it was going to sink and that this was his only chance of survival. He came off the ship onto a deserted island. He had no idea how long he was going to have to stay there, if ever somebody was going to rescue him. He had very finite resources. The book makes us believe it was an exotic island. Reality is it wasn't as exotic at all. It was an island which left very little food and comfort to a person trying to survive there. He also had very little tools because the captain had not been very generous. He had a rifle, a knife, an axe, and a Bible. Luckily, he had enormous creativity, not only to survive physically on this island, but also to survive mentally the ordeals of being there on his own for 4.5 years. Luckily, at the end, he was rescued. Now, what does that mean for where we are? If we look at our planet from far enough, does it not look like a little island in a very big universe? And can we agree that any other island in that big universe is today at least too far to reach? So we'll probably have to stick to this one and see how we can make it work. What is our reality? I think most of us agree that we would like to leave a livable planet to the next generations and the next and the next. On a completely different scale than Selkirk, also our resources, and we've become more than ever aware since the corona crisis that also our resources are finite. Luckily, we've got an enormous amount of tools, technology, and knowledge, and we do not have one brain with creativity, but we've got billions. Because the way we operate today is by taking ever more resources from this planet and dumping ever more waste and emissions onto this planet. That is a story that we cannot continue to do. What is our goal? What should be our goal? To respect the boundaries, both of our people and of our nature. And once we get to that point, we have a little bit of cleaning up to do. So the next boundary would be to regenerate what we've already destroyed on this planet. So where do we need to go? Luckily, very smart people have done a lot of thinking about this. And once in a while, I need a sip of water. Who knows this? These are the United Nations Development Goals. 17 goals and a whole number of targets attached to them on all the topics that our planet and our society should change in a way to create a social and natural balance on this planet. Interesting reading, very good websites about it. I recommend, if you're interested in this topic, to start from reading the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, Ines, yes, planets and etc. Where does this take me as an analyst? What can I do? How does it touch my field of work? Well, it does. And I've brought 4 ideas that you could think about. As an analyst, we often participate or create new business models, or we work on existing business models to turn them into digital models. We tend to think of a company as an isolated thing consisting of people and processes which need money to run. We tend to agree that a company also has very direct relationships to its suppliers. We give them money, they give us stuff or services, and we provide either products or services to customers. Now, all of these players have impact. They have impact on nature and they have impact on society because they have people working for them and they have materials they use and they have systems and they have machines and they have etc. Now, what we tend to forget is that our suppliers have suppliers as well. And that those suppliers have also suppliers, and that goes on and on and on and on in our current day supply system. You will see that the way they treat material and people, the further down you go into the supply chain, the crazier it can get. When we think about business models today, we should think about this whole system and not just me and the customer. Another example, when you work on new business models, in the digital field, we have discovered that we can play around a little bit with people's psychology. We can do that in very good ways. For example, if we want to make people learn a language, we create an app that uses gamification so that we keep getting motivated to learn that language. Unfortunately, we also use it for other stuff. This is a comics I once did. It's online. You can look at it afterwards, about how it would be to walk into a supermarket where we apply in the physical world all the tricks that we do on e-commerce. It would make a pretty scary supermarket. Where is my responsibility as a business analyst in business models? Are we creating flex jobs which do not create a sustainable living for the people working in it? Are we creating sharing platforms which share, but at the expense of the social conditions of some other people? Are we building e-commerce systems that are built to ever increase people buying stuff they don't need? Or people, even worse, buying stuff and then sending it back and thinking, not my problem. And are we using human psychology in the digital world to a good or to a not so very good cause? Number 2, responsibility of the business analyst is inclusion. And inclusion has started off in a world, I first give an example. Who of you has had to help somebody download or activate the COVID Safe Pass? Reality is that a lot of people have struggled with it. Even I struggled with it when I had to get the code of my daughter onto my app, which was not so simple at all. Unfortunately, this has caused for a lot of people an enormous barrier because they didn't know how to do it. And even worse, it had side effects because, as some people unfortunately found out, by activating the app, you accepted magically to have an in Belgium called e-locket, and so suddenly you had, without knowing, many people accepted to receive their documents online and no longer on paper, and so quite a lot of people missed tax papers and missed fines because they suddenly arrived online. But there are also good examples. Accessibility is, of course, a very big topic and a very broad topic, and the first one we think of when we think of inclusion. And so this is an example of a bank who's doing everything they can to allow people with bad sight or no sight at all to access their services, now that banks are closing ever more offices and people have to find their way online. Another example, Bigo, they do student jobs where IT students help people who need support to use their computer or their smartphone, either online or by going and visiting them. Inclusion has a very broad scope, one that every business analyst can take into account. It goes from accessibility, but also about low digital literacy, which unfortunately we've also seen in the whole period where kids had to follow class online, and that did not work out well for a very large percentage of children. The percentage of low digital people in Belgium is growing. It is not decreasing. We also have to take into account that people often have a different language background, and that especially our public services online need to be accessible for people who do not necessarily understand the languages of our country. There's a lot of inclusion to be done as far as gender is concerned, to make sure that people feel that they can also participate in something. And diversity comes across in a whole other aspects. For example, children who have two dads instead of a dad and a mum, and you can imagine a whole lot of other diversity issues that we need to take into account if we want to make people feel that they can rely and relate to online services. And of course, the elephant in the room, the energy that the digital industry is creating, directly and indirectly, because we're creating a lot of hardware to run our programs on. It's complicated to give numbers about this. And why is that complicated? If I run a software on a server, I can calculate how much energy that uses. What is much more difficult to calculate is the difference in emissions when that server is standing in Norway and maybe in a data center which has part green energy, or if that same server is standing in China where it runs on a coal-powered generator. Everybody agrees that despite the fact that it's complicated, it is going absolutely in the wrong direction. The life cycle of our hardware gets shorter and shorter, and the usage of energy in the whole sector is going up and up and up. But there are initiatives which try to turn things around. You might have heard of LOW. LOW is a website which wants to draw attention to websites and online initiatives that really make the best out of very low impact websites. Use as little pixels, as little elements, as little videos, etc. And despite of that, create beautiful websites. I recommend you go and watch LOW. There are beautiful websites to be seen with a design which might be the way that we're heading. The impact of digital, as I said, ever shorter lifespan for hardware, data centers that use ever more energy, that are growing, their demand in energy is growing much faster than the creation of green energy. And of course, traffic, network traffic is also a big factor in energy usage. And then last but not least, let's think long term. Our entire world needs to learn cathedral thinking. It is a term, I did not invent it myself. It is a term for creating things, being part of something that lasts, that will maybe only generate effects much after you have disappeared yourself. I have a very unfortunate example of short-term thinking. There's a company called Second Sight. They have, in the past years, created an implant for eyes, which is connected to glasses, which is connected to a video processing machine to allow blind people to see a very, 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 very pixelized version of their surroundings. It has created an enormous opportunity for some blind people, despite the fact that it's very expensive, for them to see and to be able to walk around independently. Unfortunately, this company has decided that that product is no longer of their commercial interest and have stopped support. But of course, I have to finish with something optimistic. And that is this theory, which applies to other problems, but we might learn from it. There's a researcher in the US who has researched political and social reform around the globe in the last 200 years. She has discovered that from the point where 3.5% of the population of a country supports social or political reform through protests, they have always won. They have always accomplished what they were fighting for. 3.5% apparently turns out to be the amount of people that make a tipping point for other people to react. For example, 3.5% means if they go out in the street and protest, the people who were told, military forces, for example, the people who were told to stop them might think there might be somebody in that group that I know, so let's just sit back and wait and see. 3.5% is a tipping point on which social and political reform is inevitable, and I'm curious to find out in the coming years what the tipping point is for sustainable innovation. But keep in mind, as a business analyst, your immediate impact is business models, inclusion, energy, and long-term thinking. And do not forget, each and every one of us can always make a difference. Thank you.